January 30th, 1944. Anzio Beachhead, Italy. Through the reinforced observation slit of Command Bunker 7, Hauptmann Werner Stolz watched the American shell descend from beyond the horizon, silent, slow, almost lazy in its arc. He had time to think. Too large. That caliber doesn't exist. Then Bunker Louisa, 340 meters to his left, ceased to exist. Not collapsed, not damaged, not breached. Raced. 4 feet of steel-reinforced concrete, engineered to Wehrmacht specifications, rated to survive direct hits from 210mm shells, built to endure months of sustained bombardment, had been replaced by a smoking crater 30 feet deep. 32 men of the 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division vanished along with the bunker itself. No rubble, no screaming, no wounded crawling from the wreckage. Just nothing. Stolz's hand shook as he scribbled into the unit log. Die Amerikaner besitzen Artillerie von unvorstellbarer Macht. The Americans possess artillery of unimaginable power. The weapon responsible was the M1 240mm Howitzer, making its combat debut with the 697th Field Artillery Battalion. Over the next 18 months, from the hills of Anzio to the Siegfried Line, from Monte Cassino to the Rhine River crossings, this single weapon system would do what no other gun had accomplished. It would destroy the German faith in concrete. What Stolz and thousands of German defenders across 3 countries were about to discover was that every assumption their commanders had made about fortification warfare, every bunker, every defensive line, every static doctrine built over centuries of military engineering had become obsolete in a single afternoon. The United States had deployed a fortress killer so mathematically precise, so overwhelmingly powerful that nowhere was safe anymore. By nightfall on January 30th, 3 more bunkers had been obliterated. German radio traffic, intercepted by Allied intelligence, revealed panic spreading through the 14th Panzer Corps. Commanders ordered troops to abandon fortified positions. Veteran grenadiers who had survived Stalingrad refused to enter concrete shelters. The psychological fracture was immediate and total. At 2100 hours, prisoners from the 715th Infantry Division were brought to Allied interrogation centers. Their testimony was uniform. The weapon that killed Bunker Louisa had created earthquake shells that shook the ground for hundreds of meters. Men described watching bunkers they believed invincible simply vanish. One moment present, the next moment replaced by smoke and absence. A Feldwebel from the 65th Infantry Division, captured 2 days later, told his interrogators, "We were told our bunkers could withstand anything. We were told concrete would protect us. They lied. Your gun doesn't damage bunkers. It deletes them." Before we continue, click that subscribe button, like this video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It brings me great joy knowing that these war stories and lessons get to people all over the world. Your support helps us bring more thrilling war stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get back to the story. The German 14th Panzer Corps War Diary, recovered after Rome's liberation, captured the shift in a single stark entry dated January 31, 1944. American super-heavy artillery renders our fortified positions untenable. Single shells produce casualties exceeding entire days' conventional bombardment. Morale critically affected. Recommend immediate withdrawal from static positions. The recommendation was denied. The slaughter continued. The path to Anzio began 4 years earlier, in a classified 1940 study conducted by the U.S. Army Ordnance Department. The conclusion was stark and unavoidable. American artillery could not defeat modern fortifications. Intelligence reports from Europe painted a grim picture. The Wehrmacht had spent the previous decade perfecting bunker design, reinforced concrete walls up to 6 feet thick, interlocking fields of fire, reverse slope positions immune to aerial bombardment. The French had built the Maginot Line. The Italians had fortified their Alpine passes. Every major power had invested in fortress systems designed to withstand sustained artillery bombardment. America's largest mobile gun, the 140mm Long Tom, could crack concrete. It could create surface damage, chip away at fortifications, occasionally penetrate outer walls. But it could not reliably destroy a modern reinforced bunker. Not in one shot. Not in 10. German engineers had simply built structures stronger than American shells could break. The Ordnance Department issued specifications that seemed impossible. A mobile weapon firing a 360-pound shell over 14 miles with sufficient accuracy to hit individual bunkers. The system had to penetrate 6 feet of reinforced concrete. It had to be transportable by standard military vehicles. No railway guns, no fixed emplacements. It needed to deploy in any theater, mountains, beaches, urban environments. What emerged from WWII Arsenal in upstate New York was nothing short of an engineering masterpiece. The M1 240mm howitzer weighed 64,700 pounds in firing position. Its barrel alone measured 35 feet and weighed 23,000 pounds, longer and heavier than most field guns in their entirety. The weapon required a 14-man crew and could fire 1 round every 3 minutes at maximum efficiency. Each 360-pound shell left the barrel at 2,300 feet per second, arcing to altitudes where atmospheric conditions had to be calculated with slide rule precision. Setup was an engineering ballet. The gun arrived in pieces. Barrel on a 6-wheeled transport wagon, carriage on another, the specialized M2 crane truck following behind. Crews excavated recoil pits 8 feet deep to absorb the massive forces generated by each shot. Assembly took 8 hours when performed by trained personnel, a testament to American engineering that such a weapon could be made mobile at all. The mathematics of destruction were precise and terrifying. At maximum elevation, the M1 could strike targets 25,225 yards away, over 14 miles. The high-explosive shell, designated M114, contained 54 pounds of TNT. Upon impact, it generated a blast radius of 50 meters and could penetrate concrete to depths that rendered any bunker, regardless of thickness, a death trap rather than a shelter. Production began in November 1942. By 1944, WWII Arsenal had achieved a production rate of 13 guns per month. Each weapon cost $380,000, equivalent to 12 M4 Sherman tanks. By the time production ceased in August 1945, exactly 315 units had been manufactured. The United States had created an industrial miracle. A fortress killer that could be shipped anywhere, assembled in hours, and deployed with surgical precision. German defensive doctrine, built over centuries of military engineering tradition, was about to collide with American industrial mathematics. The concrete would lose. The 697th and 698th Field Artillery Battalions arrived at the Anzio beachhead in mid-January 1944, bringing 8 M1 240mm howitzers to combat for the first time. The German 14th Panzer Corps, commanded by General Eberhard von Mackensen, had transformed the surrounding Alban Hills into a fortress labyrinth, interlocking bunkers commanding every approach, observation posts with clear sight lines to the Allied positions below, concrete shelters deep enough to survive the heaviest naval bombardment. For 3 weeks, the beachhead had been a killing ground. German artillery rained down from fortified positions that seemed untouchable. On January 30, 1944, at 14:30 hours, Battery A of the 697th Field Artillery fired the first 240mm round in combat history. The target, a reinforced observation bunker on Hill 150, coordinates pre-calculated by forward observers using the new SCR-610 radio system. Range: 23,000 yards, over 13 miles. The shell climbed to an apex invisible to anyone on the ground, then descended with the inevitability of mathematics. Direct hit. The bunker, rated to Wehrmacht standards for 210mm resistance, did not crack or collapse. It vaporized. 4 feet of reinforced concrete, steel support beams, observation equipment, communication gear, and an 8-man crew were replaced by a crater 30 feet wide and 15 feet deep. Seismic instruments at the beachhead registered the impact as a magnitude 2.1 tremor. Through German defensive positions across the hills, soldiers felt the ground shake. Major Herman E. Smith, commanding officer of the 697th, documented what happened next in the unit's combat history. Within hours of our first shots, we observed mass abandonment of German bunker positions. Forward observers reported enemy troops refusing direct orders to reoccupy fortifications. By nightfall, we had intercepted radio traffic indicating complete demoralization in multiple German units. The psychological fracture spread like wildfire. A lieutenant from the 65th Infantry Division, captured on February 2nd, told interrogators, "We called them Erdbebengranaten, earthquake shells. You could feel them coming through the ground before you heard them." Men who survived near misses developed uncontrollable shaking. Some refused to leave open trenches. Others abandoned positions entirely rather than wait inside concrete tombs. By February 5th, German commanders were reporting a phenomenon unprecedented in Wehrmacht experience. Veteran troops, men who had endured Soviet artillery at Stalingrad, who had held positions under sustained naval bombardment, were experiencing acute psychological breakdown at the mere sound of 240mm fire, a distinctive, low-frequency roar that carried for miles. The mathematics of Anzio were precisely recorded in American after-action reports. Rounds fired, 2,247 bunkers engaged, 67 bunkers destroyed, 61. Success rate, 91%. Average rounds per target, 4.8, but the numbers didn't capture the real impact. The German 715th Infantry Division's war diary, recovered after Rome's liberation, contained an entry dated February 8, 1944. American super-heavy artillery makes our fortified positions untenable. Officers report troops will not occupy bunkers regardless of discipline. The weapon has destroyed not only our defenses, but our soldiers' belief that any protection exists. Concrete has become synonym for coffin. At Anzio, the age of fortification warfare didn't end with a surrender or a retreat. It ended with German soldiers choosing to face machine gun fire in open trenches rather than wait for death inside walls that could no longer save them. The Gustav Line had held for 4 months. Anchored on the ancient Benedictine monastery atop Monte Cassino, the German defensive system stretched across the Liri Valley in a 10-mile belt of interlocking fortifications. The 1st Fallschirmjäger Division, elite German paratroopers, had transformed the mountainside into a fortress that had shattered 3 major Allied offensives. Bunkers carved into reverse slopes, machine gun nests with overlapping fields of fire, artillery observation posts with panoramic views of every Allied approach. On February 15, 1944, the Allies dropped 1,400 tons of bombs on the monastery itself. The ancient structure was reduced to rubble. The German defenses remained intact. Over the following weeks, Allied aircraft flew 1,000-plus sorties against Gustav Line fortifications. Craters pockmarked the hillsides. The bunkers endured. British Major General Francis Tucker, whose 4th Indian Division had suffered catastrophic casualties in repeated assaults, wrote in his diary, "We have thrown everything at these positions. Bombers, artillery, tanks. The German bunkers absorb it all. We need something that doesn't chip at concrete." We need something that erases it. On May 11, 1944, Operation Diadem began. The 240th Field Artillery Battalion, equipped with 8 M1 Howitzers, positioned their guns near Minturno, 14 miles from the Gustav Line. Their primary targets, 43 reinforced bunkers built into the mountainside below the monastery ruins, each one rated to survive direct 500-pound bomb hits. At 2300 hours, the 240mm guns opened fire. The first salvo struck Bunker Complex 7, a multi-chambered position housing a German mortar battery and observation post. The 360-pound shell penetrated the mountain itself, detonating inside the bunker system. The entire hillside shuddered. When dawn broke, Allied observers reported the bunker complex had collapsed inward. No visible structure remaining, only a depression in the mountainside where tons of rock and concrete had been sucked into a subterranean void. Oberleutnant Klaus Huber, 1st Fallschirmjäger Division, survived the bombardment and was captured on May 18th. His interrogation transcript captured the psychological collapse. We had survived months of bombing. We believed our positions were invincible. Then the American super heavy guns arrived. In 72 hours, they destroyed what 4 months of airstrikes could not touch. Bunkers that had protected us since January simply disappeared. Not damaged. Disappeared. You could watch them vanish. One moment a fortified position, the next moment empty hillside. The 240mm Howitzers fired continuously for 72 hours, expending 1,847 rounds. Post-battle analysis documented the devastation. Major bunkers targeted, 43 completely destroyed, 39 abandoned by crews after near misses, 4 survival rate, 0% German commanders, accustomed to calculating defense in terms of concrete thickness and structural integrity, found their mathematics obsolete. General Heinrich von Vietinghoff, commanding the German 10th Army, sent a situation report to Field Marshal Kesselring on May 16th. American super heavy artillery has achieved what sustained aerial bombardment could not. Our fortified positions offer no protection. Troops refuse to occupy bunkers even under direct orders. Psychological effect cannot be overstated. Soldiers now believe nowhere is safe. The monastery fell on May 18th. The Gustav Line collapsed within days. But the true victory wasn't tactical. It was psychological. The German paratroopers, among the Wehrmacht's finest troops, men who had held Crete and survived Stalingrad, had watched their invincible fortresses erased by mathematical precision. Terror, it turned out, had a caliber: 240 millimeters. By July 1944, German commanders in Normandy had learned the lessons of Italy. They built their defenses differently. The 352nd Infantry Division and 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division fortified the hedgerow country around St. Lo with bunkers positioned on reverse slopes, hidden from direct observation, immune to naval gunfire, protected by the terrain itself. These weren't the exposed hilltop positions that had failed at Cassino. These were invisible fortresses, dug deep into the Norman earth, designed to survive everything the Allies could throw at them. For 6 weeks after D-Day, the defenses held. Allied forces gained ground measured in hundreds of yards, purchased with thousands of casualties. The bocage country, ancient hedgerows creating natural fortifications, became a killing ground where German machine guns and mortars commanded every field, every road, every approach. On July 24, 1944, Operation Cobra commenced with a massive carpet bombing campaign. Over 1,500 heavy bombers dropped 4,000 tons of high explosives in a single morning. The earth itself seemed to catch fire. When the smoke cleared, German positions on forward slopes had been obliterated. The reverse slope bunkers remained operational. At 1400 hours, Four M1 240mm Howitzers of the 991st Field Artillery Battalion opened fire on Hill 122, the key terrain feature dominating St. Lo. The position was considered impregnable, fortified bunkers carved into the reverse slope, invisible to aerial reconnaissance, protected by 50 feet of earth and rock above them. Technical Sergeant Raymond Jones, Section Chief with Battery A, later testified, "We couldn't see the targets. Our forward observer gave us coordinates from 3 miles away. We computed high-angle fire, nearly vertical drop. First round was ranging. Second round was for effect. The second round penetrated through the hillside and detonated inside the bunker complex. The hill didn't explode outward. It collapsed inward, as if a giant hand had reached down and crushed it from above. 3 German artillery pieces, 2 observation posts, and an entire infantry platoon vanished into a subsurface cavity created by the blast. What happened next shocked Allied intelligence officers monitoring German radio traffic. The 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, elite paratroopers who had never retreated, veterans of Crete and Monte Cassino, troops trained to die in position rather than withdraw, began abandoning their bunkers. Not in panic, not in disorder. In calculated self-preservation. Oberst Richard Schimpf, commanding the division, was captured on July 31st near Rancy. His interrogation transcript was immediately classified and sent to SHAEF headquarters. Interrogator: Your division held against armor, infantry, and aerial bombardment. Why did you withdraw? Schimpf: We did not withdraw. We fled. Your super-heavy artillery made static defense impossible. My men, veterans who had never retreated, ran from their bunkers. Not because they feared death, because they feared that death. Being buried alive, being erased. Your weapon doesn't kill soldiers, it deletes their existence. Interrogator: You ordered the withdrawal? Schimpf: I did not need to. My men understood what we faced. They chose survival over duty. That is what your gun accomplishes. It breaks the covenant between soldier and fortification. The mathematics of Operation Cobra told the story. 240mm rounds fired. 1,247 German positions abandoned without contact. 89 bunkers destroyed. 67 veteran units routing from prepared positions. 4 German defensive doctrine, refined over centuries, built on the principle that fortified troops would hold against superior numbers, crumbled in 96 hours. The psychological foundation, that concrete and earth could protect soldiers, had been systematically destroyed. By August 1st, the St. Lo breakthrough was complete. German forces retreated not because they were defeated tactically, but because they no longer believed any position could be held. The 240mm howitzer had accomplished what no amount of firepower could achieve. It had broken the German will to defend. By autumn 1944, the Wehrmacht had retreated to its final defensive bastions. The Gothic Line across northern Italy and the Siegfried Line, the West Wall, protecting Germany itself. These weren't improvised field fortifications. These were the products of years of engineering, billions of Reichsmarks, the culmination of German defensive doctrine. The Gothic Line stretched 200 miles across the Apennine Mountains. German engineers had spent 12 months carving bunkers into solid rock, creating positions they believed could hold indefinitely. Multi-layered concrete structures, some with walls 8 feet thick, interlocking fields of fire covering every valley approach. Artillery observation posts positioned on peaks 3,000 feet above sea level. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commanding German forces in Italy, inspected the defenses in August 1944 and declared them impregnable to any known weapon. He was wrong. On September 10, 1944, the 697th Field Artillery Battalion, veterans of Anzio and Monte Cassino, positioned their M1 howitzers in the valleys below the Gothic Line. They had refined their technique through 18 months of combat. Forward observers equipped with panoramic telescopes identified targets from miles away. Fire direction centers computed solutions accounting for altitude, air density, and the curvature of shells dropping nearly vertically onto reverse slope positions. The destruction of the Futa Pass fortifications took 6 hours. Bunker Complex 12, the linchpin of German defenses, had been carved 40 feet into solid granite. Its concrete walls were reinforced with steel I-beams. German engineers had calculated it could survive a direct hit from a 2,000-pound bomb. At 09:15 hours, a 240mm shell struck the bunker's observation dome, penetrated through 8 feet of layered concrete and rock, and detonated in the main ammunition storage chamber. The mountain didn't explode, it shattered. Fissures radiated outward from the impact point. Secondary explosions tore through connected tunnels. When Allied forces reached the position 3 days later, they found a geological wound. The bunker system had collapsed into itself, creating a sinkhole 60 feet across. General Major Helmuth Pfeiffer, captured during the Gothic Line retreat, described the psychological impact. "We had been told these positions were unbreakable. We watched them break, not over days or weeks, over minutes. The American gun arrives, the forward observer calls coordinates, and fortifications that took months to build simply cease to exist. It is not warfare, it is erasure." By October, the Gothic Line had collapsed. The 240mm Howitzers had destroyed 127 major bunker complexes in 6 weeks. 300 miles north, the Siegfried Line awaited. The West Wall represented Germany's last hope. 18,000 bunkers, anti-tank obstacles stretching for miles, concrete fortifications built in the 1930s and reinforced throughout the war. Some bunkers had walls 12 feet thick, designed to stop anything the French or British possessed in 1940. They were not designed to stop 360-pound shells arriving from 14 miles away. In November 1944, 8 M1 240mm battalions concentrated along the German border. The systematic destruction began. At Aachen, the 204th Field Artillery Battalion destroyed 43 bunkers in 72 hours. At Hürtgen Forest, the 255th demolished fortifications that had held against 2 months of infantry assault. At the Saar River crossings, German troops abandoned positions before the 240mm guns even opened fire. The mere presence of the weapons triggered mass withdrawal. Generaloberst Johannes Blaskowitz, commanding Army Group G, sent a situation report to OKW on December 3, 1944. "The West Wall is obsolete. American super heavy artillery penetrates our strongest positions with mathematical certainty." Troops described the weapon as unausweichliches Verhängnis, inescapable doom. No fortification provides protection. Static defense is no longer viable. From the Apennines to the Rhine, Fortress Europe was crumbling. Not to overwhelming force, but to overwhelming precision. The Rhine River represented Germany's final natural barrier, and the Wehrmacht had transformed it into a fortress line. Every bridgehead, every crossing point, every kilometer of riverbank had been fortified with concrete bunkers, artillery casemates, and observation posts. German engineers had spent the winter of 1944–45 constructing defenses they believed could delay the Allied advance for months. They had weeks. By March 1945, the U.S. Army had perfected the art of bunker elimination into an industrial process. 16 M1 240mm howitzer battalions operated along the Rhine, supported by a fire control network that represented the pinnacle of American military coordination. The system worked with mechanical efficiency. P-47 reconnaissance aircraft photographed every German position. Photo interpreters identified bunkers and calculated precise coordinates. Fire direction centers plotted firing solutions, and assigned targets to specific batteries. Forward observers, positioned in church steeples and hilltop observation posts, called corrections in real time via radio. The Germans called it Vernichtungsfeuer, annihilation fire. On March 7, 1945, American forces captured the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen intact, the only Rhine bridge the Germans failed to destroy. Within hours, Wehrmacht commanders rushed reinforcements to contain the bridgehead, positioning troops in fortified bunkers overlooking the crossing. The 244th Field Artillery Battalion arrived on March 8 with 4 M1 Howitzers. Their orders were explicit: eliminate every German fortification within range of the bridge. The systematic erasure began at dawn on March 9, 6:15 hours. Bunker coordinates transmitted to Fire Direction Center, 6:19 hours. First round fired. Time of flight 47 seconds. 20 hours. Direct hit. Bunker destroyed. 23 hours. Next target engaged. The rhythm never varied. One bunker every 4 minutes. No wasted ammunition. No suppressive fire. Just mathematical precision applied to concrete. By 18 hours, 147 German positions had ceased to exist. Allied intelligence intercepted Wehrmacht radio traffic throughout the day. Panicked reports of bunkers vanishing. Frantic requests for withdrawal authorization. Entire units abandoning positions without orders. A lieutenant from the 272nd Volksgrenadier Division, captured on March 10th, described the psychological collapse. We watched our bunkers disappear one by one. Not random bombardment, systematic elimination. Left to right, hilltop to hilltop, like someone checking items off a list. We knew our position was next. We knew the shell would arrive. We knew nothing could stop it. Some men surrendered. Others simply ran. I chose surrender. The phenomenon repeated at every Rhine crossing. At Oppenheim, German troops evacuated bunkers at the first sound of 240mm fire. At Worms, entire companies surrendered with their fortifications intact, refusing to occupy positions they knew were death traps. At Boppard, forward observers reported Germans waving white flags from bunkers before American forces even requested fire missions. The mathematics of the Rhine crossings revealed total dominance. Bunkers destroyed. 1,847 rounds fired. 6,203 average rounds per bunker. 3.4 German positions abandoned without fire. 412 effectiveness rate, 97%. But the most telling statistic came from prisoner interrogations. Of 40,700 German soldiers captured during Rhine operations, 3,200, nearly 68%, cited fear of American super-heavy artillery as their primary reason for surrender. General Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, captured at Remagen, summarized the German perspective in a single sentence: "You did not defeat our defenses. You simply made defending impossible." The Rhine, Germany's last natural barrier, fortified with thousands of bunkers, defended by divisions of troops, fell in 3 weeks. American precision had transformed warfare into mathematics, and the equation was unwinnable. Urban warfare had always been artillery's nightmare. Cities were chaos. Civilians mixed with combatants. Cultural monuments adjacent to military targets. Friendly forces advancing through streets where a single miscalculation could cause catastrophic friendly fire. Traditional bombardment was a blunt instrument. Flatten everything and sort through the rubble. The M1 240mm howitzer made urban warfare surgical. At Aachen in October 1944, the first German city to fall to Allied forces, the 204th Field Artillery Battalion demonstrated capabilities that redefined urban combat. German forces had fortified the Rathaus, the medieval city hall, turning its thick stone walls and basement vaults into a command center and ammunition depot. Surrounding buildings housed hospitals, and displaced civilians. The fire mission was explicit: destroy the rat house without damaging adjacent structures. Forward observer. Lieutenant Thomas Crenshaw, positioned in a church tower 800 yards from the target, called in coordinates with precision measured in meters. The Fire Direction Center computed a solution accounting for urban wind patterns, temperature variations between street level and rooftops, even the deflection caused by the building's stone construction. At 14:47 hours, a single 240mm shell struck the rat house's southeast corner, penetrating through 4 floors of medieval masonry before detonating in the basement. The building collapsed inward, its walls falling into the foundation crater, its roof caving into the ground floor. The structures on either side, separated by less than 15 feet, remained standing. Dust coated their walls. Their windows shattered, but they stood. The hospital next door continued operations. Oberst Gerhard Wilk, the Aachen garrison commander, surrendered 2 days later. His interrogation included a statement that Allied intelligence officers initially dismissed as exaggeration. "You can place shells through specific windows. We watched you destroy individual rooms in fortified buildings while leaving the rest intact. This is not artillery. This is assassination from 10 miles away." He wasn't exaggerating. At Cologne in March 1945, German forces had fortified the IG Farben Administrative Building, a 7-story concrete structure dominating the approaches to the Hohenzollern Bridge. Snipers and machine gun nests occupied the upper floors. The basement housed a battalion command post. The 991st Field Artillery Battalion engaged the target with 6 rounds over 20 minutes. The first 2 struck the building's foundation, collapsing support columns. The next 3 penetrated the upper floors sequentially, 5th, 4th, 3rd, each detonation timed to allow structural failure to cascade downward. The 6th round was never fired. The building collapsed before it could be launched. A German supply depot 50 meters away remained untouched. Its walls didn't even crack. In Nuremberg, American forces used 240mm fire to eliminate machine gun positions in the Justice Palace without destroying the building itself. Shells placed through specific windows with enough precision to clear individual rooms. In Würzburg, fortified medieval towers were demolished while surrounding half-timbered houses survived. In Munich, bunkers built into brewery basements were destroyed, while the structures above remained intact, preserving centuries-old architecture. The technique became doctrine. Identify the structural weakness, compute the precise impact point, deliver 1 shell, move to the next target. No saturation bombing, no area denial. Just methodical elimination of military targets with mathematical certainty. By April 1945, German commanders in fortified cities faced an impossible choice: defend and watch their positions systematically erased, or surrender before the first shell arrived. Increasingly, they chose surrender. The 240mm howitzer had solved urban warfare's oldest problem: how to destroy the enemy without destroying everything else. The answer was precision measured not in meters, but in rooms. The M1 240mm howitzer didn't just destroy bunkers, it damaged the men who fired it. Each time the gun discharged, it generated a shockwave equivalent to a small explosion. The muzzle blast created overpressure waves that slammed into crew members standing 20 feet away. Even with cotton wadding stuffed into their ears, gunners experienced immediate hearing loss. After sustained firing missions, sometimes 40 or 50 rounds in a single day, men couldn't hear normal conversation. They communicated through shouting and hand signals. Staff Sergeant Donald Krebs, section chief with the 697th Field Artillery Battalion, kept a private journal throughout the Italian campaign. An entry from June 1944 read, Constant ringing in my ears. Can't sleep because of it. Doc says it's permanent. Half the crew has nosebleeds after long fire missions. Miller collapsed yesterday, concussion from the blast over pressure. They sent him to the rear, but we're short-handed, so he'll probably be back in a week. The physical toll was documented in medical reports that remained classified for decades. Crews serving with 240mm battalions for more than 6 months showed permanent hearing loss, 73%, chronic headaches, migraines, 61%, blast-related concussions, 34%, stress fractures in hands/wrists from handling shells, 28%. The 360-pound shells had to be manhandled into the breach, lifted, positioned, loaded. Back injuries were endemic. Herniated discs, torn muscles, chronic pain that followed men for the rest of their lives. But the gun crews, at least, were miles from the enemy. The forward observers had no such distance. Lieutenant James Hartley, forward observer with the 991st Field Artillery Battalion, operated from positions often less than 1,000 yards from German lines. His job was to spot bunkers, call in coordinates, and watch the shells impact, then adjust fire if necessary. He spent months in church towers, hillside observation posts, and bomb-damaged buildings within range of German snipers, mortars, and artillery. His casualty rate was 47%. Nearly half of all forward observers serving with 240mm battalions were killed or wounded, the highest loss rate of any artillery specialty. They were priority targets. German troops learned to identify the observers' radio antennas, their optical equipment, the distinctive binoculars they used. Snipers hunted them. Mortars bracketed their positions. Artillery fire saturated suspected observation posts. Those who survived carried different scars. Captain Robert Chen, forward observer at Anzio, Monte Cassino, and the Gothic Line, was hospitalized in December 1944 with what medical reports termed acute combat exhaustion. His hands shook uncontrollably. He couldn't sleep. When he closed his eyes, he saw the bunkers collapsing, the men inside them vanishing. He had called in fire missions that killed thousands of enemy soldiers, men he watched through optical magnification, men whose faces he could sometimes see in the instant before the shells arrived. "I was effective because I stopped thinking of them as human," he told a psychiatrist in 1945. But you can't turn that off when the war ends. The Germans who survived carried their own psychological wounds. Gefreiter Hans Müller, 352nd Infantry Division, was pulled from a collapsed bunker near St. Lo in July 1944. He was one of 3 survivors from a 40-man company. He spent 2 weeks in a German field hospital, then was reassigned to a depot unit in the rear. He never returned to frontline service. Post-war medical records documented what German doctors called bunker schreck, bunker shock. Symptoms included claustrophobia in enclosed spaces, panic attacks triggered by loud noises, recurring nightmares of burial, refusal to enter basements or underground shelters. Thousands of German veterans carried these phobias for decades. Men who had fought bravely at Stalingrad, who had endured Soviet bombardments, who had survived years of combat, found themselves unable to enter subway stations or basement rooms without experiencing overwhelming terror. The 240mm howitzer had proven that precision could be more psychologically devastating than overwhelming force. It left its mark on everyone who encountered it, those who fired it, those who directed it, and those who survived it. Some wounds don't heal. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. The M1 240mm howitzer had fired its last combat round 3 days earlier, demolishing a bunker complex outside Prague. In 18 months of combat, across 3 countries and dozens of major battles, the weapon had fundamentally altered military history. The statistics were compiled by U.S. Swiss Army Ordnance in the summer of 1945. Total rounds fired in combat: 74,151 confirmed bunker destructions, 3,476 success rate on targeted bunkers, 94 per average rounds per destroyed bunker, 3.8 maximum range achieved, 25,225 yards, 14.3 miles. But numbers couldn't capture the weapon's true impact. That became clear in the post-war interrogations. Generaloberst Alfred Jodl, chief of the operations staff of the German Armed Forces High Command, testified at Nuremberg in 1946. The American 240mm howitzer destroyed our defensive doctrine. We had built our strategy on fortified lines: the Atlantic Wall, the Gustav Line, the Gothic Line, the West Wall. We believed concrete could buy time, could preserve our forces, could create killing zones the Allies could not cross. The 240mm gun made that doctrine obsolete. It didn't just destroy bunkers. It destroyed our soldiers' willingness to defend them. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, captured in May 1945, was more direct. You could build a bunker with walls 10 feet thick. It made no difference. The American gun would find it, target it, and erase it. Our men understood this. They stopped believing in fortifications. When soldiers lose faith in their defenses, they have already lost the battle. The psychological impact extended beyond morale. German defensive engineering, considered the world's finest in 1940, had been rendered worthless by American industrial precision. Billions of Reichsmarks spent on concrete, millions of man-hours constructing fortifications, entire divisions positioned to defend fixed positions, all of it obsolete. Military academies worldwide took notice. By 1947, every major power had revised its defensive doctrine. The French abandoned plans to rebuild the Maginot Line. The Soviets shifted from concrete fortifications to mobile defense. The British redesigned their coastal defense strategy entirely. The age of static defense, dominant since the invention of gunpowder, had ended. The lesson was clear. Precision defeated depth. Mobility defeated concrete. Industrial production defeated engineering. The United States had manufactured 315 M1 howitzers in 3 years, a weapon system that rendered obsolete defensive structures built over decades. American factories had simply outproduced European fortification doctrine. The math was unforgiving. It cost $380,000 to build a gun that could destroy a bunker. It cost millions to build a bunker that couldn't survive. The M1 240mm howitzer served in Korea, where it demolished North Korean bunkers with the same efficiency it had shown in Europe. It remained in U.S. Army inventory until 1957, when guided missiles and tactical nuclear weapons rendered even super-heavy artillery obsolete. But its legacy endured. Modern military doctrine still reflects the lessons of 1944 to 45. Static defenses are tombs, not shelters. Fortifications are targets, not sanctuaries. Concrete cannot protect against precision. The fortress age, which had dominated warfare for centuries, ended in 18 months of systematic destruction. From Anzio to the Rhine, from Monte Cassino to the Siegfried Line, the M1 240mm howitzer proved a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Industrial precision always defeats defensive ideology. The Germans built fortresses. The Americans built a gun that made fortresses meaningless. And the world learned that in the age of precision firepower, nowhere is safe.